is an awesome dude. He's got a couple of things going on. Well, more than a couple, but he's got his own insurance agency. You may know him as Christian Brindle Insurance Services or Six Figure Medicare. And there's probably some other names out there as well. But, he's done a lot of cool stuff so far. He's published 5 books. And he just came out with another one. So then maybe that's 6 books then. Is that right? So yeah, published 6 books. And, the cool thing about having Christian here on the channel, and we're going to talk about his new book soon, but the cool thing about having him here is that he's mainly focused on Medicare. And it's going to be really good insight, especially if you're right now in final expense and you're just thinking about, transitioning over into Medicare, or if you're just in Medicare in general and you found this channel because, you were interested in final expense, you're going to get value out of this regardless. So, Christian, one, thank you so much for taking the time. Thanks for coming on. And let me hand it over to you. If you could just introduce yourself and then kind of give us just a brief, synopsis of where you were before the insurance and how you got into insurance.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ken, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. You run a great channel and you're providing a lot of great information for agents of all different kinds, right? Maybe final expense agents currently, or maybe people that are doing Medicare or something else and they want to add final expense to what they're doing. So I just, I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited about it. And
Thanks.
So yeah, kind of my introduction is, for anybody that might not know me, as Ken was saying, I run an insurance agency that's located just outside of Salt Lake City, Utah, called Christian Brindle Insurance Services. When I originally started it, it was just me. There was nobody else. And so I kind of just named it after me because I couldn't think of another better name. And it became very well branded as we grew and as I started hiring employees and agents, and we developed a team internally here in our office, and we just never changed the name. And so a lot of people, it's funny because we have a billboard that's up. Our first billboard, we have a couple billboards around town, but our first billboard that went up about 6 months ago, about 3 months back, some guy calls into the office because he thinks we're just like some little mom and pop agency, and I'm working out of my garage or something like that. And he calls from the billboard because he was trying to pitch me something, and he was like, I can't get to him. I can't get to him. There's walls of people. I can't get to him. I'm like, that's by design, bro. But anyway, so where I run that agency, I also do a lot of work with insurance agents. I'm particularly Medicare agents. So I run the Six Figure Medicare Agent Facebook group that, as of right now, has about 4,300 members in it.
Awesome.
We run a YouTube channel that's just my name, Christian Brindle. It's got about getting close to about 3,000 subscribers on it. We do weekly trainings of different kinds about how to be a top producer, how to write more policies, how to scale an actual business, how to scale an agency. So we try to provide a lot of really great free material to that. And then I also run a conference called the Six Figure Medicare Agent Summit. This was our first year doing it. We have one scheduled for next year. So definitely got a lot of things going on at all times. To talk about, how I got into the industry, your other question about that was, so I am, like a lot of people in the insurance space, I had a parent that was in the business. And so my dad was a Medicare agent for about 25 years before I ever got started. So I got started actually when I was 20 years old.
Wow.
So his career was 5 years older than me at that point. And, I came in and worked with him, and I kind of learned the ropes, and kind of what he originally taught me how to do was how to cold call. That's what he taught me, because he built his business in the 90s and the early 2000s. So that's what he knew how to do. So I was learning cold calling. We were chasing down 4 or 5-year-old direct mail leads.
Wow.
So a lot of ground and pound, a lot of very old school strategies. But what it did for me is I became very, very proficient on the phone. I became very, very proficient on conducting myself. And I became very, very proficient at making presentations and making sales and overcoming objections and all those things. And so that's kind of how I got started into the business. Beforehand, I got started very young. So I'm 30 now. I've almost been in for about 10 years. So I started when I was about 20 years old. And before I got into the insurance business, I dropped out of college. So I went to community college here in Utah for 1 semester. Business degree was my degree. And I just was like, I didn't see the point of it. I dropped out. I wasn't interested in the classes. I was playing hooky every day anyway. And so after one semester, I just completely dropped out of it. And then before I got into insurance, I was actually working at an assisted living facility for seniors, ironically enough.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was working in the kitchen. I was a server. I helped cook. I I washed dishes. I did all kinds of things at that job. And it was definitely a great kind of pre-job to what I do because it helped me learn how to communicate and learn how to, identify with people that were much older than me. So that certainly prepared me a bit. But yeah, so I went from that to full-time insurance agent. And that's kind of how I got started. That's a little bit about my background.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And you said you just had a birthday, and I know when we were talking, we discovered that we have a birthday on the same day. So that's happy belated, and that's great.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thanks. Small world. So you've like you said, you've got a lot going on, and your path into the insurance is like a lot of folks who have somebody who already been in the business. And I think that's awesome. And especially you started off cold calling and now you've transitioned to, I'm assuming you're not cold calling anymore. Is that right?
Yeah, no, not for many years.
No more cold calling. And I hear some people still do it, but hats off to you because that's not my cup of tea at this point.
It's grueling. It's grueling.
Yeah. It can be hard enough for an agent with leads, let alone with just a list of names and numbers. So
absolutely.
And I wanted to say as well, I looked at some of your channels that you have out there, like the YouTube channel, and you've got a lot of good free information, a lot of good stuff. So anybody here watching, don't miss that. Put him in YouTube, Christian Brindle, and you'll see what he's got going on. So let me ask you what some of your biggest successes in this business were, because I mean you've done a lot so far. You've got books. You've got walls up, so you can't just call and get Christian on the line. You've got a team. You've got multiple things that you're doing. So that's a big list. So what would you say is up there at the top?
Oh man, it's a great question. I would say for me, I think everything that I'm doing on the agent side of things comes from the point of it comes from the perspective of that I've been in the trenches. And I've been a very successful producer because so for me, when I came in and started working with my dad, I'll go a little bit deeper into that story a little bit and kind of explain what I'm kind of more of a preference to what I'm about to say to answer your question. But, I cold called for 4 years and then I started to kind of figure out, I made 6 figures cold calling, by the way. So I made my first 6 figure year before I ever really bought leads, before I really did anything outside of cold calling. And so it wasn't really until 4 years in that I stopped doing that and I started just kind of experimenting. And it was a gradual growth as time went on in terms of like how we would get business. So, we went from cold calling, or I went from cold calling to buying shared leads, shared with like 6 or 7 agents. And compared to cold calling, they were great.
Yeah.
I was like, these are amazing. They're shared with like 30 agents, but I don't know any different, right? I just think that's what everybody does. I think that's normal at the time. And so it was just kind of a gradual progression to kind of get to where we are today. But it certainly got to the point where before I ever started working with an agent, I sold as an individual producer for 6 years before I ever did that. I've been a top producer for 6 Medicare carriers, most of which multiple times over. I've written a lot of business. I've written a lot of insurance by my own pen. And that was very important to me because I never wanted to kind of be the guy that was giving advice on things he had never done. And there's certainly a lot of people out there. I'm not going to name any names, but there's certainly people out there that they make an entire business off of selling advice. And usually like they spent 6 months selling insurance. They spent 8-9 months selling insurance. And I'm just like, I don't buy into that so much. I want to learn from somebody that has really at a very high level for a good amount of time won and did it themselves other than just teaching, right? Like, that old saying, those who can't do teach. And so I think for me, everything I'm doing on the agent side, Six Figure Medicare Agent, the Six Figure Medicare Agent Summit, the books I'm writing for agents, those kind of things, it wouldn't have any substance if I didn't have the experience myself. So that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind. I mean, there's certainly things that are that I have as favorites of mine. I think like we just decided on a dime last year that we were going to throw a conference this June in 2022. And I didn't know if we were going to get 40 or 50 people to show up or what. We ended up having 150 people there. We spent almost no money on advertising. It was all organic.
Nice.
And so that's certainly one that's close to my heart, because that was a very special experience for me. And we're, next year our goal is 300 people at the event. So we want to double up on what we did this year, but this year we'll spend money, but on advertising anyway. We spent money on conducting the event, but not really on the advertising and the promotion. But I mean, I think those are probably the things that helped me the most. Of course, I love seeing people that I've worked with, that I've coached, that I've mentored, whether they're contracted with us or whether they they do private consulting with me. I love seeing those agents absolutely explode. There's been several agents that have been, kind of pupils of mine, for lack of a better word, that I've just seen them absolutely take off and just, they might have even become six-figure earners and multiple six-figure earners much quicker than even I did, and I love to see that as well. That's definitely like a pride moment from the standpoint that I'm just happy to see that for them. So those are the things that come to mind particularly. I think it's just the agents that we've been able to impact through our material. Awesome. It's the production that I was able to do as an agent before I had a team or before I had anybody that was that I'd hired that works with me in my office. And also, the event is certainly one. Those are the three that definitely come to mind.
Awesome. And that shows a lot. You're a good guy and you got a good heart, and I can see that being flattering, putting out an event and having organic, just, 150 people show up. That takes a lot more than it can seem to get that many people to show up. So for that just to be all organic, that's awesome. And like you said, when you're there and somebody and you're teaching and you're mentoring and you see them succeed and do well, I mean, there's nothing like that. And I think that's great to hear that those are part of your successes. So now that was one of the things that you said we had talked about a little bit before too. You've been there in the trenches, you've successfully sold and helped a lot of people. And now you're able to and have been teaching other agents to do that. And, that was another awesome thing that I heard that you had said. And that's what also had intrigued. And I'm really happy to be able to do this with you, is because there are a lot of people out there who are just recently licensed or maybe have never even done any continuing education courses. And all of a sudden they're just trying to build this huge agency. And it takes a lot, it takes a lot of adversity and overcoming adversity. It takes a lot of, you can be a good salesperson, but if you don't have the mental strength or a good team or the ability to pursue and push forward through the hard times that come in this business, no matter how good you are, you really can't lead somebody else through that. So for you to be able, to be in the business for that long and sell successfully and be a top producer over and over again, and then lead other agents, that shows good fruit and from my perspective. And I think that's great. And I love to lift that up. So if you guys didn't catch that, I just wanted to reiterate that. So now what do you attribute to, those successes?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I appreciate you saying that, by the way, Ken. I think that's why your content is so good as well, because, it's coming from a place of experience. I think people can tell sometimes. Sometimes they can't. Maybe some people can't, but most of the time they can. And they can definitely tell who's actually done it and who hasn't. And your content speaks for itself. So you're in the same boat there.
Thanks.
But I would say the things that have kind of made me successful, some of it's not exactly sexy. I think the first one in particular is I'm a workhorse. I work like crazy. I work all the time. Like today, I got here at 7:30 because I had some meetings I had to be a part of. I'm probably going to be here till 7:30 tonight p.m. And I'm 10 years into my career. I should be. I mean, a lot of people be taking it easy. Like I just have an obsessive work ethic, is what I would call it. And maybe it's not the healthiest thing. I don't know. Like I'm sure that psychiatrists would probably have a fun field day with me. But I think my ability to put in the time and work. I typically work 6 days a week. And then, even on Sundays, I'm usually spending an hour or two getting caught up on this or that. It's just, I feel like I'm always doing something. And even when things slow down and I don't have as much to do, it's almost like I'm punishing myself because I find new projects to kind of add to the plate, right? I mean, we almost created like another division of our company when we started the Six Figure Medicare Agent, because we're doing consulting, we're doing courses, we're doing all these different things because I had too much free time on my hands and I needed to fill that. And I think that has a lot to do with it. I think for somebody that is extremely successful, and I'm not saying that I don't even know if I'd say I'm extremely successful, but for anybody that is very successful or massively successful, I think they have that inside of them, or they develop it. Maybe that, I think it's over time they kind of learn to kind of develop it within themselves. So I think it's certainly the work ethic. I think it's certainly a commitment. There's a lot of people that will get into insurance, and you probably have heard it too on the final expense side. I hear it all the time on the Medicare side. I just want to give this a try. I'm going to dip my toe in the water. Most of the time when I hear those things, and that's the first thing coming out of somebody's mouth, usually they don't make it. And I might not say anything. I just bite my tongue. I'm like, okay, but, and they usually don't make it. They don't usually do very well because they're just like 1 foot in, 1 foot out from the get-go. And I feel like if you're going to be really successful in something, forget insurance. It could be anything. You got to really make a commitment to that it's going to work, right? Like it's burn the ships kind of mentality. So I think I have that. And I think the other thing is I'm willing to adapt and change. The way that we do business has changed many, many times since I started as an agent at 20 years old, not knowing anything, thinking that everybody was cold calling. That we've gone through a lot of different evolutions in how we do business. And I think always being willing to change with the times and keep up with trends, I think has really boded well for me because, I mean, construction workers work hard. Yeah. People work at fast food places. They work hard. They're not going to be necessarily successful. I mean, maybe they become a manager, they end up buying a franchise, whatever the case might be. But like, I feel like you need to work smart and towards something with potential as well. So I think those are the three things that come to mind for me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and that's a common trait with high level producers or high successful people is an insane amount of work ethic, the ability to adapt and change and grow. And then, like you said, developing that and being all in and going all out. Mm-hmm. And I'm in the same boat as far as, when I hear agents say that I just want to try this out, especially with final expense, I tell them this is really a full-time commitment, and I'll typically refer those agents, elsewhere if they just want to try something out. Because with where I'm at in my agency, at least, I'm very close to the agents I bring on. So I make sure to spend the right time. And I know what you say, but you never know. You never know who will work out. And, I don't have, because there are some times where people just try it out and all of a sudden they light it up and they're great and they become a top producer and then they leave everything behind. So there's never the point to discount anybody.
Yep, definitely.
So now we've talked about successes. And I want to talk about a little adversity, because obviously through growing what you've grown and doing what you've done, there's going to be adversity. So why don't you share with us some of the times that you've had some of, we'll say, your biggest trials, the biggest adversity, and then if you could elaborate on how you overcame that.
Yeah, 100%. And this doesn't get talked about enough. So I love the question. When I think about it, I think the things for me that come to mind the most is when first starting out, when you're first starting out, like, this is how I've always looked at Medicare versus final expense. I've looked at so there's similarities here, but I've always looked at Medicare as maybe a harder type of product to learn in terms of like the X's and O's, but it's probably easier to sell because you can sell plans without premiums, and they kind of have to get it. Otherwise they get penalized and things like that. Mm-hmm. Final expense on the other side, I would look at it as a much easier product to learn. It's a lot simpler. It's just pretty straightforward. Might be a little bit of a tougher product to sell though, So I've looked at them kind of as a contrast in that. I think they both have their trials. I think Medicare, if you don't learn it well enough, you're not going to be able to sell it. You have to be able to understand it very well. Final expense, you really have to know what you're doing in terms of talking to people. You have to with both. There's similarities for sure. But so I think for me, starting out, I was always a good people person. I always liked talking to people. But when starting out cold calling, the extent of the training I had was I was given a list. I was given a phone. I was given a script. Have fun. And I was like, wait, what? I'm like, so I remember, that was kind of how it started for me. And I didn't really feel that confident in making calls and things like that. I learned by doing, however. But when I think about that, that's where a lot of doubt in my mind would originally come from. Because, and I think everybody goes through this, especially when they're first learning. Some people pick it up really quickly. Most people, they take a little time. Mm-hmm. And so that was certainly something that had a lot of adversity. Another time that comes to mind is the last AEP I went through completely by myself. For those of you who don't know what AEP is, it's the annual election period. It's a time period where Medicare changes is Medicare open enrollment period for the most part. Everything's changing. It's the busiest time of the year, and it's very important. It's a very important season for a Medicare agent. It's October 15th through December 7th, so we're actually closing in on it as we speak.
It's coming up.
I went through that time period, and I was, several years into my career. I had built a pretty large book of business at this point, had a lot of clients, but Medicare is heavy on the customer service and the retention aspect of it. I look at Medicare sales almost as like Netflix, right? It's like month to month. You want to keep them subscribed. Whereas I look at like a lot of other types of sales, there might be more like a movie ticket. You're going to make more per sale, but then it's more transactional, So like with Medicare, that's the challenge with it, is keeping people on the books, because that's where the real money comes from. I was completely by myself. So I was wearing every hat in my business. I was wearing the customer service hat. I was sales. I was marketing. I was everything. And I remember going through an AEP and I was working 90 hours a week, 100 hours a week. And just to try to stay afloat and keep my head above water. And my production was down from the year before. But I was working harder than ever. And that was just a moment where, I remember going home and telling my wife, we were just newly married at the time. I remember going home and telling my wife, I'm like, I feel like quitting. I feel like just selling my business, just quitting, because I didn't have any help. I was trying to do too many things on my own. And I actually got on a Zoom call with a very, very successful person in the Medicare space, somebody that, was pulling in 8 figures a year routinely. Wow. And the thing that they told me, it might have been obvious to a lot of people, but for me, for some reason, I couldn't wrap my head around it at that point in time. But they told me, you need to hire somebody. Yeah. You can only do so much as one person. There's only so many hours in the day. And, from there, I hired, the next year, I hired my first employee. And ever since then, I've really leveraged the concept of working with other people, building a team around me, having great people that work with me to kind of help me get more done on a day-to-day basis. So like people ask me all the time, how are you able to throw a conference? How are you able to work with agents? How are you guys able to sell policies? All these things. I'm like, because I'm not doing it all myself. I might be what you see, but there's a lot of things that you don't see behind the scenes every single day. But that was a really, really difficult time period in my career. I really felt like throwing in the towel because I felt like I was working harder than ever, but my results were becoming less and less prevalent because I was spending more time just trying to keep the people I already had, which is a prevalent theme in the Medicare game, right? I think people find this in the ACA game too and things like that. Anything that you're doing that's like, got that month-to-month factor of it. So those two things in particular are probably some of the most challenging times. There's others, but I won't bore anybody with it.
No, that's okay. That's great. asking for help and learning a professional way, say, oh, well, you know what, time to hire somebody. I think that holds a lot of people back. And you said a lot of great things. Final expense is very similar to a movie ticket, where, the customer service, you may change beneficiary forms to help someone get out. You may help switch ownership or get something back up if they miss a payment or something like that. But that there isn't a ton of customer service after the sale unless they want to increase, or, we always encourage touching base with your clients and asking for referrals and sending a birthday card, but there really isn't much after the sale besides, following up with them and seeing if they want to increase due to inflation, or there's other ways to do it. But in a general sense, whereas my understanding with Medicare is there's a constant with the open enrollment, you got to re-enroll folks, and then you got to enroll new people. And so that can be a lot more challenging, like you said. So what I'm getting at is with final expense, there also is a time in the business to ask and hire somebody. And, I've had a great virtual assistant who I just recently started with, and they have made my life so much easier. And I've just given them a very small piece of the pie, not even a huge bunch, not a ton of work. And it takes a lot of weight off of me, and it adds a lot of time for me to continue to grow. So, just being able to ask for help and being honest about it. I think that's one downfall for entrepreneurs or people who are go-getters, is we want to hold all that weight and we want to do it the way we want to do it, but being able to trust somebody else, that's really great to hear. So that'll lead into another question. I'm assuming, is that when you really started agency building, around that time, whenever it was all you around your 5th year of selling, and then you hired somebody else? Is that how it began for you? And if so, or if not, correct me, but could you elaborate on, what the next steps were for you in your growth?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that's when we started to go from Christian, the broker, to Christian Brindle Insurance Services, CBIS, the actual business, the actual company. We were becoming less and less about one person and more and so about an actual organization, right? So that's kind of where I would look at that as. I was always independent. I was always 1099. So I always looked at it like I was building my business. But I mean, a business, if a business is one person, it's one person. Right. Like, I mean, it might be incorporated. It might, legally be a business. But to me, a real business. And that's what I think a lot of people strive to. Not everybody. Some people just want to be a one-man show forever, and that's perfectly all right. To each their own. But I feel like to become a real business, it's an organizational thing. It's a team effort. And so that's where we started to kind of take down that process. And so kind of the way we started to grow is I hired on my first assistant, who she's actually still with me today.
Awesome.
She actually just left like 20 minutes ago. I heard her leaving. But so I hired her on. And the thing about hiring people is, if you've ever had to hire somebody, like whatever you imagine the challenges are, it's kind of probably more difficult because it's very hard to kind of depict. It's just like agents, like you said, you don't always know. Same thing. Like you could love somebody in an interview and you could hire them and it could be a train wreck. I got really lucky with her because she was fantastic, and she, still is. She's still with me. And so she was the first person I hired. She took a lot of pressure off of me in terms of keeping everything in check with our clients. Like with Medicare, it's not just reviewing their plans, which that's a big part of it, but it's answering their questions. Like, I need to go to this doctor. What am I going to pay? Is this doctor in network? I have a claim that didn't work out. Like, claims are probably the biggest part. The claims are just the biggest time suck, because big part of Medicare to get them to stay on with you is like, if they have a problem, you're the guy or the girl, you're there. And so she took that load off of me, which allowed me to spend more time selling. So from that time period to where my production dipped, that AEP from the year before, which had never happened. It was always more than the year before until that year. And the next year, my production was double what it ever was before.
Wow.
So that made a huge difference because I could focus on income producing activities. I could focus on exclusively writing business for the most part. I would say probably 90% of my day-to-day customer service tasks went away because she was able to take those off my plate. So I was producing a lot. Then I got to the point where, I had even more free time. And so like I said, I sabotage myself in a way. Like I can't let myself off the hook. So that's when we started Six Figure Medicare Agent. That's when we started the branding. We started, the agent training, and we started to hire more people. We hired internal agents, LOA agents to kind of make sales so I could just completely step away from producing, but our book of business internally wouldn't stop growing. And we hired agent relations employee. We hired content creation. We have a virtual assistant as well in the Philippines, help with social media. So we have a pretty good sized team now. And so it's just the way I look at it is this. I did a webinar yesterday with my a very good friend of mine. His name's Glenn Shelton, runs a company called Lead Heroes.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
And me and him are incredibly close. We did a webinar yesterday. We had about 85 agents on the webinar. And it was all about this exact topic right here, hiring, staffing, and just kind of go into those details. Now, he has about 150 employees. He has more than I do.
Wow.
But they're all in the Philippines for the most part. And so one thing that I talked about on this webinar yesterday is like, for me, I focus on an area of my business. I get it to the point where it's so profitable then that it's overwhelming me with work. I hire people to then assign to take over my tasks so I can step away. I start a different focus in the business, and so like for me, it started out with production. We get to the point where it's just this monster, right? Like, from referrals to inbound calls, like there's more than maybe I can handle by myself. Hire customer service, hire agents to write the business. I can step away from that part of it. I can focus on working with agents. So we recruit agents. We consult with agents. That becomes a lot. Now we have 200 contracted agents. I have to hire someone for contracting. I have to hire agent relations. I'm still working on that. I'm still helping with that, but I don't have to do as much. We start doing conferences, start doing events. So for me, it's about almost like developing another branch of the business to the point where it's profitable and it's bringing in revenue. That revenue can be used to staff people to kind of help maintain and take over some of the tasks I was doing to where I can focus on something else. And so it's almost like a tree that has all these different branches. And that's kind of the way I look at what my business has become. And it's become very unique and diverse over the years.
That's awesome. And that's just, reinvesting into your business, reinvesting into yourself and investing in others. That's the proper way to do it. A good foundation. You get to a point to where you can step back, because a lot of people will fall into that trap to where they want to step back before they can. And then all of a sudden they don't have the production to back it up, and then they just get smashed. So it's a step-by-step process, and it is like a tree, and trees take time to grow.
Yes.
And
yes.
It takes time. So that's really great to hear. So did you think you'd be where you are now, looking back 5 years ago?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Cool.
I always had big ambitions for myself and big, aspirations, but you never quite know what it's going to look like. You just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And I certainly didn't know, kind of what would entail us growing into what we became. So no, I would say I never saw it coming.
Awesome.
Step-by-step development and growth. And then, somehow you get there.
Awesome. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I want to talk to you about your books. So what's your day-to-day like now compared to what it was whenever you started? And actually, before you answer, I wanted to highlight this, and it just slipped my mind. But, I think the really valuable thing about you, Christian, is, obviously what we've been talking about, but the fact that you started off as an independent agent, you've built this business, and now you can teach other agents who just want to be agents, or you can teach agents to build as much as they want, because you've done all the aspects of it. It's not like you just, and now there's nothing wrong with getting hired in to recruit or anything, but it's not like you were just hired in to recruit. You are able to do it all and teach other agents as much as they want. So, and I think that's great, because there aren't a lot, from my understanding, and there may be, but I don't think there are enough out there that are advertising and recruiting that have actually built it from the ground up the way that you have. And there are some out there, but there's also, like we've talked about, a lot who haven't. So you have the ability to replicate what you've done with other people. So other agents out there looking for something like what he's built, well, there you go. Okay, so now, yeah, what's your what's your day to day like now compared to what it was whenever you started the business?
Yeah, so it's strikingly different. So when I was first starting and I was cold calling, my schedule was Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, if necessary. I would get here at 9 a.m. I would get to the office at 9 a.m. I would make calls, and my goal was to schedule 20 appointments from Thursday through Saturday. That was my intention. And if I could fill my calendar by Wednesday, I didn't need to make calls on Wednesday. Some weeks I did, some weeks I didn't. And I would call 9 to 12, and then I would call from 3 to 8. And that was my schedule. My goal was to make 300 to 400 phone calls each day. And so that's kind of how I started. And then, I used to drive to every appointment. I would go out on appointments. I go into the field. Don't do that anymore.
Yeah, that's how I started with insurance.
Yeah. And so I would go on these appointments, and I'd have usually, if it's a good week, and I had a good week on the phone on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I would have a full calendar Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I'd go out on those appointments. I'd try to make as many sales as possible. And so it's comparing, that was my whole thing. If I needed to return a call to a client, I'd get a voicemail. I'd call them back, that kind of thing. It was me. It was all me. And there wasn't any marketing. There wasn't anything like that. Nowadays, I don't leave the office. Once I'm here, I'm here. Unless I have to go to lunch with somebody, which is rare. I try to avoid that. I try to make people come here. And so, I usually will eat lunch here. I'll have something I brought from home or something because I just don't have the time to go anywhere. I'll usually get here anywhere between 9 to 10. I'm not usually here before 9, although this week I've been busy this week. And then on my day-to-day basis, usually what I'll do is from when I get here, I'll spend my first hour catching up on emails. I get about 300 emails a day. Wow. So I take 2 times out of my day to check emails. That's usually right when I get here for an hour, and then right before I leave. That's my two windows that I check emails, and that's probably takes about an hour each time to kind of clear through them all, respond, things like that. The next person I need to hire is somebody to go through my email. That's probably the next thing we need on staff. And then, it changes by the day. So I don't actually really recruit. I mean, we contract agents, but I think I'm a terrible recruiter. I don't really recruit. Every agent we've ever contracted has came to me. They seek me out because, they're a fan of our channel, our content, whatever the case might be. And they usually come to me. I don't really like slide in an agent's DMs and I'm like, hey, I don't do that. Yeah. And I just haven't needed to do that. People come to us and, I'm flattered by it and I love working with the agents that we work with. We work with some amazing people. But I typically, by the time I get here every day, I usually have from 10 to 5, a myriad of different things already scheduled for me. So everybody in the office has a link to my calendar and they schedule things for me all the time, whether it's a new agent that wants to contract, whatever the case might be. If it's a business meeting for the summit for next year for our conference, there's just a pretty big diversity. Once in a blue moon, I'll write a referral if maybe it's something that one of the internal agents can't handle. Once in a blue moon, I'll have to talk to one of my clients that will only talk to me. But there's just a difference. And so usually my schedule is full by the time I get here. I would say by Monday of each week, my calendar is full for that whole week already with things.
Wow.
And so I'm just a very, very busy person. I'm just trying to make sure I get caught up on those things. But usually I'm sitting here on a Zoom call with somebody. I'm on the phone with somebody, or somebody has come in. They're sitting at my desk where I'm at right now, and they're meeting with me in person. And, I try to make time to train our agents. Every Monday, I do a Monday morning meeting with my whole team, and we kind of go over what we need to do this week, what we need to focus on this week, what I need certain people to focus on this week. And so that's kind of how it goes now. It's just we've gotten to the point where the business is as well known as it is with the agents and also with the consumers. We also do like content for seniors. We do Medicare content. So we have another YouTube channel that does Medicare content for seniors. We have a podcast that does Medicare content for seniors. And so that attracts business to us. And so I shoot a lot of videos. I do a lot of videos too. I usually come in on Saturdays and I'll shoot videos all day from like 9 to 5, and then I'll go home. And then I'll usually send that off to someone on my team. They'll edit them. They'll schedule them throughout the week. I used to do all that by myself, not anymore. And so that's kind of like a normal week for me. Most weeks, I'd have to go back probably 13 months in my calendar to find a week that wasn't completely full.
Wow.
It's just busy all the time.
Yeah. Hey, well, that's great, and that's like structure. You have a business that can run without you actually being there, and that's a business. You can step back for a moment and then have all of these other branches and everything, all these other parts working, and then you step in and you work, and then you step back, and that's great to hear, because I know there's a lot of folks who want to get into that position. And I think that's awesome. That's really, really good. And you're, I don't like this, like, not in a bad way, but like a slave to the schedule. You got your schedule, what's in the calendar, you stick to it. It's not like you're all of a sudden going out and playing Angry Birds for 20 minutes in the hallway when you got something else going on. So that's important, not getting distracted. Okay, so let's talk about the books. I mean, you've published 6, and you just had a new one just come out. So tell us about it.
Yeah. So the new book that just came out, the first couple of books that we put out was for consumers. We actually self-published some books on Amazon about Medicare, like Medicare educational books, mainly for consumers as like a lead generation tactic, and they've certainly been effective in that regard. The last 2 books I've put out have been for agents. So this new one that just came out is for agents, and then the previous one we wrote about 2 years ago was for agents as well. So the new book, I actually have a copy of it right here. It is called Superstar: What Top Producing Insurance Agents Do That Mediocre Ones Don't. And so that's essentially the title of the book. It's all about it's almost looked at as like, you can almost think of it as a case study. It analyzes what makes the top 1% of producers the top 1% of producers. What do they do differently than everybody else that puts them in that position to be that successful? So it's definitely a celebration of excellence. It's a celebration of success. And it goes into how they think differently than everybody else, how their strategy is different than everybody else, how they value their time is different than everybody else, and just everything that goes into that, and how they work harder than everybody else. It's a combination usually of all of that. And so that's what the book is all about. It's all about really what it takes to be in what I would call a superstar in our industry.
Awesome. So that book is definitely going to give agents the ability to see kind of behind the scenes and some real time, real tried and tested facts and ethics that will help them get to the next level, or to help them become a superstar as well. That's awesome. And coming from you, you've done it. So that's fantastic. And where can they get a copy of the book? And I'll throw a link in the description as well. But real quick, if someone's just listening to it, where can they get one?
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Ken. I really appreciate that. So you can get it on Amazon. You can either get a paperback version like this one I have right here, or you can get it on Kindle. The Kindle was just published today, so it's available as of today, at the time of recording this. So you can either get it on Kindle, or for ebook, or you can get it a paperback version. Amazon's the best place. So if you just look for Christian Brindle and Superstar, it should be very easy to find. Even if you just search Christian Brindle in books or something, it should come right up, pretty easy to find. It's hard to miss with that cover.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great cover. It's very, very catching. And like I said, I'll throw a link in the description for everybody as well, so you can just click on it. All right. So I do have a couple other questions. I know I said I'd ask you a few other ones, but you've had a lot of success with those books, I'm assuming, as the consumer side, and I think that's a great thing. I never really actually heard of that from other insurance agents, making consumer books to generate leads as far as informational books. So that's something I'm thinking about for Final Expense.
You should. You certainly should.
Yeah, that's great. So I do want to ask just a few questions about the personal side of you, if that's okay.
Of course.
Awesome. So what are some goals, outside of the insurance business that you're striving for?
Yeah. Man, there's not a ton because I'm so engulfed in what I do. But I mean, I think for me, I'm married. My wife actually works in the office too, so she's an agent. She's been licensed for probably 6 years, but never done anything with it. And then this past fall, she just was tired of being at home, wanted something to do, and she really wanted to be an agent. So I said, okay, we'll figure this out. So she works in the office, but I'm married. I have a daughter who's about 3.
Nice.
And for me, I mean, my goals outside of insurance is I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good father. So I used to live about 30 minutes away from my office. So I was driving usually 30 minutes each way, 30 minutes here, 30 minutes back every day, 6 days a week.
Yeah.
So an hour a day. And so as I've gotten busier, as I've gotten more successful, my time has just become harder and harder to come by. And so like last fall, we actually bought a house. It actually closed on December 7th, which is the last day of AEP. Of all days, right? They would not allow me to do it the next day. I was like, how about December 8th? They're like, no, December 7th or no deal. I'm like, oh, sons of bitches. But excuse my terminology, but
Okay.
but so I bought a house that was 3 minutes away from the office. The only reason why I went through that during AEP was because a house became available. We really liked it. My wife and I really liked it. It was 3 minutes from the office, so it would cut my commute out completely. It would give me an hour back in my day every day. And so that was important to me because I want to be able to quickly get home and quickly get here, whatever the case might be, because I don't have to leave as early in the morning. I don't have to, I can get home a little sooner, right, in the evening. And so it just gives me more family time. So I think I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good father. I don't want to be the father that's always not home or never there. So that's something I'm incredibly conscious of. Outside of insurance, I love investing. It's something I've gotten into the last couple of years. So I don't have a tremendous amount of money in the stock market, but I probably got like 40, 50 grand in the stock market. And my one thing I'd love to develop is, to have $1 million in my portfolio in the stock market. That's a goal of mine, kind of like a personal goal. Cause I like buying stocks. It's fun for me. I just, I want to be a really good investor. I'd love for my revenue from investments to equal what we make from insurance someday. And so that's certainly a personal goal of mine. And yeah, I mean, I think I never know quite what insurance has in store for me. I mean, I don't know if I'll sell the business one day. I don't know. I can't say. I don't know what 5 years from now holds. But at some point, I would love to, potentially exit and do something else. So, and I don't know what quite that might be, but there's a creative, the creative side of me is stimulated by that idea, and so, who knows? We'll see. I might never sell the business. It might never make sense. And we just keep it forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. But, yeah, I mean, so that's just a couple of things on that.
Awesome. So you got a couple bucket list things, 2 or 3 before you die that you definitely want to do?
Oh, sure. Yeah, certainly. I love to travel, but regrettably, because I'm so busy all the time, and I have been for a long time, my wife and I don't go on nearly as many trips as we want to. Actually, we're planning one right now. The day after the summit ends next year, we're going to go somewhere for 2 weeks.
Nice.
And so I want to do a lot more traveling, with my wife. She's always wanted to go to Japan. That's probably on her bucket list.
Awesome.
I could care less about that.
I love the Japanese culture.
I've been in the airport that's as close as I've gotten in Tokyo. I've never been outside of the airport. But I'd love to, I mean, for me, I like to travel. So I'd never been to Europe. I'd love to go to Europe. I've been to Malaysia. I've been to Singapore. I've been to, what's the other one? Hong Kong. I've been to different places like that. So I like the travel side of it. I was really young early in my career. I didn't have any employees or children yet. So I was able to travel a little bit more. I like to travel. So I like to go on more trips with my wife. That's certainly a bucket list thing for me. On a personal side, just not business related at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the main one that comes to mind.
And how about if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Oh man, what a good question. Um,
And why?
I think if I could have a superpower, it would be to read people's minds.
Oh, okay.
That
How
would be
come?
that'd be my superpower. Because I hate not knowing what people are thinking. Like, especially in like most of the time, it's not even something that crosses my mind. But there's certain things where you just wonder. You know,
Yeah.
you're like, what do you think? You know, is this person? I may be a little paranoid too. So if sometimes I'll get into the mentality where I think like someone's plotting something against me or something like that. Maybe I've gotten better at that over the years.
Hey,
I'm
I've
not
been there. I get it.
I'm not as bad about it as I used to be, but like sometimes you just want to know what like a family member's thinking, or you know what I mean? Or like somebody on your staff, or, you know, even a client, you know, or something like that. I'd love to just be able to just pop into their mind and see exactly what they're thinking. Because then I know where I stand with people.
Huh.
Not that, I mean, you always find out eventually,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. No. Yeah.
but that's probably the thing that comes to mind. I would love to be able to just read people's minds. The other, it would help a lot with closing deals too.
Yeah. Yeah. It would. You know. Yeah. You could relate real well. No, that's great. Okay. So guys, don't forget. Well, Christian, that's about all the time. First of all, so